Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm Rutkoski. I'm an assistant professor and small grains breeder here at University of Illinois. This morning I'm going to be talking about wheat breeding to improve the profitability of soybean wheat double cropping in Illinois and surrounding states. So we all know that agriculture productivity has been increasing at a really impressive rate. We're doing really enormous progress, and even with inputs relatively consistent over time. But we still face a lot of serious challenges. So profitability is sometimes hard to achieve. It varies a lot over time from year to year. It's a big challenge. Also environmental concerns. We're all aware of nutrient runoff into our rivers and streams and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico. And so these are some of the challenges now that we still have to address. And I believe that small grains, and especially winter wheat, is a part of the solution to these problems. So it's been shown that even in the Midwest, places like Iowa and Illinois, rotations that include small grains can actually be just as profitable as a shorter corn-soybean rotation. It can sometimes give you greater profit stability, and there's benefits to the environment. Less freshwater toxicity, less agrochemical use, and weed control can be just as effective. So even though you don't see a whole lot of small grains and wheat being grown, it's still a very good option, and there are a lot of distinct benefits. Now in Illinois, actually, there's quite a bit of winter wheat in the southern part of the state, although it is still considered a more minor crop compared to corn and soybean. So this is just a map showing where wheat is grown in the state of Illinois. It's mostly in the southern part, where it's grown in combination with soybean in a double cropping system. So that means the wheat's planted in the fall, harvested around June, July, and then soybeans planted immediately after that. And it's a very common system. So what's really encouraging to me is that, especially in recent years, in southern Illinois, the profitability of wheat, soybean double cropping is actually greater than other options, such as just corn alone, soybean alone, or wheat alone. So that's really encouraging to me. That shows me that, hey, this is a system that is worth supporting, and we should focus on how do we improve further the profitability of that system, and potentially even bring that further north to other parts of the state. So that's kind of one of my goals as part of the Illinois Small Grains Program. So our Small Grains Program is actually a combination of two research labs working on small grains. We have a big wheat breeding program, also an oat breeding program, and we're getting into some other grains such as barley. And really what we're trying to do is improve the productivity of these crops, but also look at ways we can improve the sustainability of agriculture overall. So we want to sustain people, but also sustain the environment. These are some of the people, part of our group. So we have graduate students, postdocs. Here's the other PI, Dr. Juan Arvilais, who's leading the work on oats. We have a lot of undergraduates working with us as well, and we're kind of always looking to grow, so we probably will be hiring soon, so keep an eye out for that. For the winter wheat breeding program, when I started, I took a very large-scale conventional program, and then I thought one day, look, I really need to redesign this and rethink starting from a blank sheet of paper, because now we have tools like genomic selection, we have things like high throughput phenotyping, even the way we know how to test and design trials and evaluate, the knowledge has advanced so much now that we really need to rethink everything we're doing. So I took that approach and I said, okay, what's the strategy that's going to maximize my success as a plant breeder? And I came up with this strategy where it's all about accelerating the rate of genetic gain. So we do speed breeding in the early generations, and that means that we try to develop lines as quickly as possible. We use greenhouses and accelerated growth conditions. We also try to get as much seed as quick as possible using a few tricks to try to get as much seed so we can get to testing quicker. So it's all about trying to reduce the time. Then we use genomic selection to select parents, because that's a very critical step. We want to be able to select parents to keep moving the breeding cycle along. And then when we're doing testing, it's all about trying to sample as many environments as possible and fully randomizing and having good statistical design in the field. So we're really able to use all that data to train prediction models for selection. And so this kind of accelerated breeding strategy is advantageous not because it doesn't reduce the time to variety development. Variety development and testing always takes a long time. You always have to test to determine if the variety will be a good one to recommend to farmers. The difference between the rate of improvement is different. So instead of, for instance, a 1 bushel per acre increase every year, you will be getting a 2 bushel per acre increase every year from your genetics. So that's really what we're after, is getting those bigger jumps between, the difference between your old variety and your new variety is just going to be bigger. And so that's really what we're after. And then the other aspect that I've really honed in on is how do we define our objectives and be very, very consistent and optimal in the selection so we achieve profitability. And so for that, I focus on high yield, but also early maturity, low vomitoxin, which is caused by Fusarium head blight, can be a big problem in Illinois, and also high test weight. And so these are the 4 traits that are really critical for profitability, especially in a double cropping system. Of course, since yield is a very important trait, obviously, for profitability, I do a lot of yield testing. So coming into this fall, I'll be having actually 8 locations where I'm doing the yield evaluation, 5 in Illinois, plus 2 locations in Virginia, and then additional out-of-state locations for variety release testing. Scab resistance, another huge component of what we do. So we test around 3,000 small plots every year for scab resistance. That means we're out there visually assessing the disease and also taking the grain samples and assessing every grain sample to try to really evaluate and use that for selection. Scab resistance, if you've never heard of it, it's a pathogen that causes a lot of problems because of its impact on the grain. So it causes a toxin to accumulate in the grain. It's called vomitoxin. And there are very strict thresholds to how much vomitoxin can be in the grain. And it can, you'll have serious discounts at the elevator if you go above a certain level. And the prevalence of vomitoxin in wheat in Illinois, it tends to always be there. Some years is worse than others, but it's pretty much consistently a looming threat. And if it's not properly controlled, you can lose your entire, basically all that work that you put in, you get nothing for it if you have too much vomitoxin. Early maturity, also extremely important because we're talking about double cropping. So if you can harvest the wheat earlier, you can plant the soybean earlier, and then get a higher yield in the soybean. So it's been estimated that for every 1 day that you can harvest wheat earlier and plant soybean earlier, you can get a 1/2 bushel per acre higher soybean yield. So that's a pretty sizable advantage to early maturity. And so that factors into profitability. And then with these 4 traits, I put it all together. I select for total net merit. So this is the actual profitability. That means for every wheat line that I'm selecting as either a parent or for a variety release purpose, I'm actually calculating the profit potential based on those 4 variables. So I have a function that just relates each variable to the profit, and I can just directly select for that. So that's yield, early maturity, vomitoxin, and test weight. And it was very exciting. We actually made the news recently. We were out there harvesting at one of our field trials, and a reporter happened to be driving by and pulled over and took some pictures of us. This is one of our machines, a new combine that we got this year. And you can actually read all about this. They talked about our, how we select for profitability, and that it's not just only about yield, but keeping in mind all these other traits, and that especially in a double cropping system, you have to think about not only the wheat, but also the soybean. So just to summarize, we have a vibrant and innovative small grains program at University of Illinois. We breed for total net merit, which it heavily emphasizes scab resistance, as well as yield, test weight, and early maturity. And we really work tirelessly to make wheat a viable option for growers in our region. So before I end for questions, I have to acknowledge, all the people that contributed. It's a huge operation, and so we rely on a lot of hands and a lot of minds to make it work. So thank you, and I hope I can take questions. I have some grain samples as well.